Greetings, GameCola faithful, and welcome to the GameCola podcast. This is podcast number 154. The quality is the opposite of the floor. And I am your host of Podcast Commander, Joseph Martin, joined by...
I'm Blu Ryder, and I write for GameCola sometimes.
I'm Alex, the Jedraszczak, and I also write for GameCola sometimes.
Now, if you listened to our last episode, which you did not have to understand this episode, but we hope that you listen to many episodes of the GameCola podcast, because it's a good show that we are very proud of. You may have heard Jeddy implore me to go in to... Actually, I don't know how fervent you were in the actual podcast.
Yeah, how much of it got edited out?
It got edited out.
I don't... Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. Anyway, I think in any case, Jeddy asked me to cover something that I talked about in the Discord, and I made him wait because I wanted to play the new Pokemon video game first before going on this rant. But it's the title of the podcast. You know what you're here for if you're here and listening to this. And I promise it won't be the whole podcast, but let's do it. So, Jeddy, what is the thing you wanted me to talk about?
What was it? It was the conspiracy that Nintendo no longer has to put money into Pokemon now that it's not a handheld seller. I think that was what it was. Right.
So the question is, why is Pokemon the way that it is now? Right. So the with Sword and Shield and now Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, it is sort of apparent that even if you like the games a lot, like I've enjoyed Sword and Shield and I have found fun in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, that it doesn't seem like they're these top quality, top-notch, big productions that push the limits of their platforms like they were for the first 7 generations of the series. And when people say, like, well, why this is, it's like, well, it's because they can make bad games and people will still buy them. And my point is, like, that has been true for a long time. Yeah. And even if I haven't liked all of the choices that they've made in all of the games before Gen 8 Sword and Shield, like, it wasn't for lack of, like, effort. A lot of the time they were strong choices that I just didn't, for me personally, like, I felt like they didn't work. Like in X and Y, right? Like, the fact that they came up with, like, 5 different rivals wasn't cheap or, like, low cost or poorly done in the sense that, like, it wasn't well polished. It was just that it was a choice that they made and it didn't really work very well. It was too scattered. The characters didn't get enough time to have depth and it just didn't work. But it wasn't like poor effort. It was, or not even poor, but just like, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't like, I'm trying to think of good words for it. All of the Pokemon games, I would say before Gen 8, like, whether or not you like the choices that they made, they were polished and the games were what they were designed to be, right? They had an idea of what they wanted to do, and they accomplished that goal, whether or not you liked the goal that they accomplished. Whereas in Sword and Shield and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, that is not the vibe that I get at all. I get very much a sense of there was stuff that they wanted to put in this game that they just didn't get a chance to. Things did not get to look as good as they wanted it to, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and so why now? And what were you saying, Jay?
Oh, no, the major complaint that everyone had that, like, it was missing half of the Pokemon, that they didn't give you the full 100% roster of all Pokemon.
And then they made you pay for more of them.
Yeah. Which, to a certain extent, you can just say, well, that's kind of what modern development is. Like, there's inflation and we're still selling a $60 game, despite all the extra effort that has to go into making a modern game. But beyond that, it has never held them back before, right?
Right. Like, why are all of these decisions happening now? Because I feel like maybe after Gen 2 even, Gen 3, like, certainly well before now.
Yeah.
You could make the same argument that, like, hey, you could put anything with the Pokemon name on it and it would do really well. Just because Pokemon is an international multimedia giant franchise, and any weaknesses that are in one part of it can be supported by another part of it. And what I'm saying is that the big thing is now that Pokemon used to be, its main goal used to be to sell Nintendo DSs and Nintendo Game Boys. And that is no longer its purpose, because the Nintendo Switch has... Okay, there's a concept, not just in video games, but in like retail in general, of loss leaders.
I was just going to say.
Are you guys... Yeah. Are you familiar with this term?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it in the world of motorcycles, because the concept is... Well, are you familiar with this, Joseph?
I'm not with the motorcycle end of it, but now I'm insanely curious, so please go on.
Okay, so if they make a series of motorcycle, right? You have, the Kawasaki Ninja, let's say, for example. What is the cost difference to machine all of the parts for a 250cc bike versus a 500cc bike versus the 650 and the 1000 and the 1200? I can tell you that when they sell the 250cc bike for around $3,000, that it does not cost half the price of the 500cc bike. Like, it's almost the same. So why is the 250 so much cheaper? They are selling you the bike that cheap because they know in their mind that you're going to go, wow, this bike's fun, but you know what? I wish it was faster. And you're going to buy the other bike as well. So they just made, $9,000 or $10,000 or whatever off of you buying two bikes because they sold you the smaller one cheaper, knowing that you would buy the bigger one later. They were banking on that, and they undersold, even though the costs are approximately the same. To them, they're only making, a few $100s off of the sale of the 250, but they're making a few thousand off of the 500. And then you're also going to then go and say, you know what, I really actually want to get the big one. I want to go for the 1200. I'm going to go all out. I want to be doing, I want to do a wheelie trying to go from, 90 to 110. And so I'm going to buy the big bike and I'm going to spend, $15,000 on this big one. So, well, now you just bought a bike that cost them, the same $3,000 to make, but they made like a $10,000 profit on it. Right? Like,
this is fascinating.
Yeah. Doesn't have to do with video games.
Jeddy? Did this happen to you?
Okay, so
this is gonna be a long segment, so go for it.
I don't know
if the Pokemon segment's gonna be long. So.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if you remember my old pictures on our actual internet website, GameCola.net.
Yeah, vaguely. I remember motorcycles being a part of it. Now that you've brought up this whole thing.
So, and that's the thing is that I always rode like vintage Vespas, and you get like the 125 or the 150. Like, there aren't a lot of options, and all Vespas are going to be like $5-6 grand no matter what. Like vintage ones maybe more like 2, 3, 4 you're buying secondhand from some guy, but they all cost around the same price range. And people would always say to me, well, for $6 grand you could be getting a 500cc motorcycle. Or, if you wanted to get a 250, a small bike, you can get them for, half the price of what you're paying for the Vespa. And so I was like, well, why? Why is it like, what is the big difference that makes motorcycles cheaper when they're smaller? And like, I looked into it and basically discovered this whole scheme of like, well, they're selling the small bikes cheap so that you will then later also buy the bigger bikes. It is to make money on both ends, that they can make money a little bit at first, but then make additional later. So yes, because people used to complain like, well, why are you wasting your money on this scooter? The thing is that the scooters are sold at a cost to make money selling scooters. Motorcycles are sold at a cost to make money selling you two motorcycles.
So this does relate sort of to video games. It's
Yes.
maybe not the exact same strategy, obviously, but like consoles, video game consoles are sold at a loss almost universally. And like the things that aren't are probably like the weird niche ones, and maybe even those, like, I don't know.
The Ouya?
And I don't know. That, I mean, it didn't work, so like I don't know why it didn't work. But like from a financial monetary standpoint, like with the Nintendo Switch specifically, right? Like they do not make money on the Nintendo Switch. They make money on software sales and additional hardware sales, which is why, for example, the controllers are so expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Because like replacing controllers is like and additional controllers is like not just for the Switch, but for like all consoles is like one of the ways that they make profit off of selling you a console. The other thing is that they make, any game made by Nintendo, they get profits off of that game. And any game made by someone not Nintendo, they get a cut of all of the sales on their platform. So they just, for the Switch to make a profit, purchasing a Switch needs to cause you to buy enough games so that the profit to Nintendo exceeds whatever loss they had on selling you the Switch initially.
Yeah.
Now, I would think that in a certain sense, like the cheaper cost bicycle that is basically the same with a few parts switched out, right? Is that the idea, right? Like it's just like the changes to go from the lower CC to the higher CC are not substantial.
Yeah.
But so like your Zeldas and your Marios, right? Those games can be given probably huge budgets that aren't necessarily there to make profit. They're there to get people to buy Nintendo Switches, which will then in turn cause them to buy more games, because very few people buy a video game console and only buy one game for it.
Yeah.
Because that just feels incorrect, right? If you buy a video game console, you're supposed to have multiple games for it, because it feels like a waste if you only get one game for it, even though like that's not really how it works. And there may be people who end up only playing one game on their console pretty much, but they'll always buy a few at least.
Yeah, like the concept of, I want to play Breath of the Wild, so I'm going to spend $60 on Breath of the Wild. It's like, well, sure, you now have Breath of the Wild, but what are you going to play it on? And so then it suddenly becomes, what is that, $360 or whatever.
So I think that my conspiracy theory is that like Nintendo has a stake in the Pokemon company, and probably some part of that agreement is specific to video game sales. Maybe not exclusive, but I'm sure that's a big component of it. They probably offer some form of professional support or resources or something. There's some contribution that they have probably historically made beyond just having Pokemon games on their system. I would have to think for that sort of partnership to make sense. But the idea was that Pokemon sold Nintendo DSs, right? And that's why, I think that's also why, Pokemon games, and, Game Boys too, though I think, especially with DSs, Pokemon games started being about, hey, we're including all of the features that this handheld system has. Those are signature things, and a lot of the time, I feel, it would sometimes feel like Pokemon was the only one using certain features, right? Diamond and Pearl had Chatot with the microphone.
I loved it.
And they used, wireless communication. They used internet. The Pokemon, I think, was one of the first handheld games that I ever played. Probably the first one that used the internet to do stuff. I traded Pokemon with strangers on the internet. It didn't work on my home Wi-Fi because for some reason, the DS couldn't get past our security firewalls, or I wasn't smart enough to tell it how to. But I could go to the pool, and they had free Wi-Fi at the pool, and so every day I would go to the pool and see what Pokemon I tried to trade on the global trade station, if that went through, if someone took my offer. And that was a daily ritual for me for an entire summer.
Did you ever swim?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it doesn't take long to to figure out, and then I'd put a new Pokemon up, and then I would have to wait another day because it would get traded within the amount of time I was there at the pool. And then like, you know, with the 3DS, there were, you know, you have stuff like I think it used the camera, it used gyro for certain parts, especially in Gen 7. I think there were some like gyro places, and just like different things, they try to integrate things that were part of the DS hardware. You know, even Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, not just Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, but like Pokemon used both the Game Boy and the DS slot, and you could trade Pokemon from your Game Boy game to your DS game through certain mechanisms. And like, I don't know if any other company really used like having two games in your DS at the same time like that. Right? So like, I think that really was a big part of it. Pokemon could have these huge swelling budgets, probably in partial support from Nintendo, because the goal was certainly, you know, you want to make profit on the game, but like the bigger goal was make a game that every child will buy a DS for, and then they'll buy other games.
Yeah.
Too. But Nintendo doesn't need that now with the Switch. Because the thing is that meant that Nintendo doesn't have to spend development resources on making super big system sellers or as many super big system sellers for the Game Boy. But now all of their big IP are going to be on the Switch.
Yeah.
And so they're going to spend all the money on the big Zelda and the big Mario for the Nintendo Switch and the Animal Crossing, right? And like at this point, like the additional are people going to... Lots of people are going to buy the Pokemon games, and lots of people already have bought the new Pokemon game, the Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. But is it going to sell more Nintendo Switches? I don't know if that's really going to be the case. There's not much of a driving factor anymore. So now the Pokemon games have to be like your Vespa, Jeddy. They have to be sold and developed to make a profit on their own.
Yeah. And this is the problem with like selling to children versus selling to adults, is that like adults have money that they can spend on their own. Children do not have money. So if you're selling to an adult, you're going to sell more Nintendo Switch consoles with Breath of the Wild and something like that, versus having kids that are going to convince their parents to buy the console for Pokemon alone. Either, there's like multiple children, so you're selling one copy of, Pokemon, and then they get to play all the games on the Nintendo Switch. Or the person already has the Nintendo Switch because they already bought it for Super Mario Odyssey or whatever. So you're not selling an additional console per unit of games sold, right?
Yeah, and like that, I think I didn't have this analogy pre-prepared for the podcast, but the Vespa versus the motorbike is like, I think, a good analogy, right? Like, now the Pokemon games, like, they have to include stuff like the DLC because right? Like, that suggests that it's out of their hands. They have to do stuff that people don't like. But like the reason that this pressure exists now where it didn't before is because the Pokemon games now have a greater burden to make a profit on their own, more profit per game sold than they had before. I'm sure they still like, I don't think they were necessarily, I mean, selling it at a loss doesn't really work the same way because it's really more of a lump sum of like development costs and time, and then like then that doesn't, and then there are some continuous, like, I'm sure, like server maintenance and whatever it costs to host a game on like a platform, and some minimal retail costs, especially now that like most purchases are digital, probably. Like there's not like you don't lose money on every game sold like you do with a Switch, but you have this big lump sum of development costs and time, like opportunity costs of like working on this game versus working on the next Pokemon game or another game. Like, that's the fundamental shift that's changed. I think that's also probably why Pokemon is now trying to expand beyond the Switch, like moving into the mobile space. Like, why did
Yeah.
Pokemon Go happen in 2016?
Yeah.
Now, I certainly didn't think this at the time, but like now it sort of makes me think like maybe because they saw the Switch and knew that like they couldn't rely on being the front runner of the handheld market anymore. So they're like, we need to branch out. And maybe not like even against, maybe Nintendo was also like, yeah, you need to branch out because this like partnership that we've had going on in this form isn't going to make sense going forward. And that's potentially why they took a leap on Pokemon Go. And then it wasn't like super well designed, but it was still Pokemon. So everybody was super into it.
Yeah, because I don't think we've explicitly stated it that, like, sure, you're selling the console and the game, so there's your 360 or whatever. But the thing is, if you now, I guess we did talk about this, but like, you wouldn't buy a DS for a bunch of crummy games, but you will buy a bunch of crummy games if you have a DS.
Right. You'll go and see like, oh yeah, this little thing. And even if you've picked it up in like a bargain bin, like someone still bought that game at some point.
Yeah,
and Nintendo made their profit off of that $1 DS game that you found in the bin.
Yeah.
So they don't care. Like even if the retailer never got to sell it, I think Nintendo still gets a cut of whatever the retail spent on it.
Yeah, in order to get it into the store had to pay for it at full price at some point. They pay the wholesale price, and so
right.
the MSRP is different. But then if it's sitting around on the shelf, they also have to consider how much it costs to operate the store, and so they will sell it at a loss in order just to get rid of it and get something for it. But yeah, so Nintendo already made the money when the game was released.
Right.
And not even talking about Pokemon, but talking about some third-party crummy... hold on, do I have it in this drawer? No, it's in the other drawer. Sesame Street Sports.
This is a video game that you own, Jeddy?
Let's see. Tiny Toon Adventures, Buster Saves the Day, Jeopardy.
On Nintendo DS?
No, sorry, these are my Game Boy games that I got.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, Pac-Man.
Tiny Toons did not seem very DS. It's a bit of a stretch.
Sorry, yeah, this would have been like 3-4 years ago that I talked about going to a garage sale, and I don't even, like, we were just looking around, and I happened to ask, like, oh, do you have any games? And this girl was like, oh yeah, let me go upstairs. And she like just goes into her room and pulls out a Game Boy Color in like a little Ziploc with like a bunch of like really crummy third-party games in it. And it's like $10. And so I'm like, yeah, sure.
With the Game Boy Color?
The Game Boy Color and the like 5 or more crummy games. There was one or two. There was like a Yu-Gi-Oh game that I found that like if I want to sell it now, I think I can sell it for like $20 like by itself.
I was gonna say even the Game Boy Color like that. The Game Boy Color for $10 is like a really good deal.
Yeah,
like even taking out like collector speculation out of the equation, like I think a Game Boy Color is worth more than $10 just like from a personal like. I guess it sort of depends if you have one already.
Yeah.
But like
Sesame Street Sports or whatever it was could barely be considered a game.
Sesame Hoops 3-on-3.
It in theory it responds to user input. So there's that. It has that going for it. But the point is that Nintendo at some point made money off of the sale of Sesame Street Sports, which they never would have bought had they not already owned the Game Boy, right? That they bought the Game Boy, presumably... Oh, that's right. I think it came with Legend of Zelda Season something, whatever. I don't know. I didn't play it. Not Link's Awakening, but the other one that was for Game Boy.
Yeah, so I think sort of going back to it, like for Pokemon to sort of, and they may have figured it out a bit, right? But so like for Pokemon to sort of go back to the glory days where it was the choices that were being made that were controversial instead of the state of the video game that was controversial. If that distinction makes sense. I think they need to find a new reason to invest a lot in the budget of the game
Yeah.
and get bigger returns out of it. And I'm sure there's a way, because like at the end of the day, right, like I don't think the people who make the Pokemon game want to make a cheap Pokemon game, right? I do think that the people involved in the team want to have a reason to spend a lot of money and make a really good Pokemon game with a big budget that everybody likes. But their reason for doing that and the vehicle with which that gives them returns beyond emotional satisfaction, which does not pay investors, unfortunately, has to change. And maybe they have found it in, I think like that's what Let's Go was, like trying to move people into, I don't know if Pokemon Go was supposed to point people towards Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, or if Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was trying to point people more towards Pokemon Go. Yeah. I would think the latter would be more profitable for them.
And I do think that there's a bit of a draw because it's like, okay, hey, 25 to 30-year-olds, remember Pokemon? Well, guess what? It's still around. Remember that original one that you played back in the day? Well, guess what? You can play it on your phone. You got one of those, right?
Yeah.
You've got phones, don't you?
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
But yeah, that I don't think that they're trying to take kids who are playing Pokemon Go on their parents' phone and try to get them to play Pokemon Let's Go, right? I don't think that was the expectation.
Why don't Final Fantasy keeps getting like mobile ports and stuff? Like the original is available. Why isn't there like Pokemon Red and Blue for your phone?
That's interesting.
So one answer to that question could be like contracts. Like there's some exclusivity rules about like
Nintendo consoles?
What they can do with Nintendo, where like Pokemon can release new games on mobile platforms, but they can't release old games.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or certain games on non-Nintendo platforms.
Just with what was Jeddy was saying, just like, oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, sure that there are a lot of people who already. The other side of that is that like most people who, if you really want that, like you can do it yourself.
I mean,
I knew many people who had in 10 years ago, like were doing that already on their phones, on their calculators. Mm-hmm. People used to play Pokemon on their school calculators.
T184 or whatever.
No, it had to be like a fancier one, like an N-Spire.
Oh, really? Because there were ways to put like, I think there was like Super Smash Bros. On your T184 and stuff.
Unless we're like with good graphics, like the T184s that I had were like Game Boy resolution, like original Game Boy resolution, whereas like the N-Spire was the fancy one that I had in graduate school. And it had like a full-fledged computer screen. Yeah, well, with like color and stuff.
No, it was like Game Boy graphics, but you could still like play the game. You could definitely play Doom.
That was probably like a remake for like maybe built from the ground up for the TI then, because I don't think that you can. Again, like the TI-84s were not fancy enough graphically to do a whole lot, but like there were definitely calculators where you could just play Pokemon. So like that's part of it too, right? So like, are you gonna convince enough people who don't already do that to get Pokemon on your mobile device? I don't. And like what work needs to be done to get all of like the connectivity features so that you can trade and battle and use that's probably just something that no one wants to do. to deal with. So yeah, Blue, what do you think about my Pokemon conspiracy theory?
Oh yeah. What do you have to say? What do you think?
I think I don't have enough knowledge on the subject of, like, what they're selling, like, consoles at a loss for and stuff. I don't have enough business sense to really say anything about it, which is why I haven't been, but, like, I don't know, it sounds plausible. I don't know at what point you need, like, what point a conspiracy becomes a fact, but it seems plausible enough.
Well, Jeddy, are you satisfied? Have I convinced you as to why Pokemon is the way that... And also, like, to be fair to Jeddy, you played Red and Blue and Sword and Shield. Not both of them, but those are the mainline Pokemon games that you've played.
Yeah.
Right?
What was it? I was also playing...
You played Mystery Dungeon for a bit.
Yeah, I played Mystery Dungeon. But what was the one that I was playing? Because, like...
I can list off a bunch, like Pokemon Ranger.
No. I was playing a mainline Pokemon game because I ended up... I just... Like, there's a point where I realized I can just pick up, like my Game Boy Color for $10. I can just spend, $20-$30 at a local game store and get a Game Boy Advance or whatever, right? And, if I dig deep enough, I can find a crummy but still playable copy of the Pokemon games, somewhere. And so I just started, like, getting them. But
you haven't played any of them yet?
Christina was playing through them, and then, for whatever reason, I started playing... I don't remember which one it was.
What system?
DS.
Okay. What do you remember the starter that you picked?
It's Omega Ruby is what I was playing.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
The remake of Gen 3.
Right.
That's a 3DS game.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I forgot.
What did you think? That is an interesting place for you to be, like an order of video games to play.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because you played Red and Blue, then you jumped to Sword and Shield, which is, I'm sure, massively different, and also everyone was complaining about it.
Yeah, it was a little different, yeah.
And then
a few things had
going
changed.
back to a remake of a game that's came after Red and Blue, but also you haven't played, so you've got all the new mechanics added onto an old world. That is a frame of reference that I cannot really identify with, but I'm very interested in.
Yeah, it was interesting to finally get context of, like, what a Pecha berry is or whatever.
Yeah, that's back when they still grew berries on trees.
Yeah.
They only did that for 2 generations.
Yeah.
They put it back in this game, and you can kind of tell, like, there's a reason they kind of got rid of it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a pain.
Yeah, and, like, it's linked to your real-time time clock or whatever.
Oh, yes. That's the other part of it. So, like, in later games, what they did was, like, that was still the case, but, like, instead of having to, like, physically go places and water and pick up the berries, it was just, like, an item in your bag that you could check up on.
Oh, okay.
And I think you could get items to speed it up if you wanted.
I'm sure you could.
Water cannon, mulch and stuff.
It's also reminding me of I had been rewatching Paul's playthrough of Earthbound on the GameCola YouTube channel, GCDotNet. Like and subscribe. And it's funny hearing the chirps of the chicken. I don't know if you're familiar with Earthbound, Joseph. How familiar you are with the playing?
Not with the chirps of the chicken.
That is a very specific thing to be.
I've watched good portions of Earthbound gameplay, but I'm not familiar with the chirps of the chicken at this current moment.
Okay, so have you ever during your playthroughs of Earthbound purchased or found an egg?
No, I haven't played Earthbound. I've just watched people play it.
So the thing is,
I don't remember people purchasing eggs.
Yeah, so part of it it's weird because it's inventory management, right? You have very limited inventory, and there's a lot of things
Right.
that they do with your inventory. And one of them is that you can pick up an egg. I think it's like $4 or something. And the concept is the longer you hold on to the egg, which is using your inventory space that you could otherwise use for other things. And after so many minutes of gameplay, it turns into a chick. And you can tell because as you're playing, you will just out of nowhere hear a little chirp, and it like a tweet, like a
Mhm.
I don't know if that comes through.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, thanks.
That was pretty good from what I could hear.
And then after like an hour or something, it turns into a chicken, and it makes this like beep boop sound. And Paul is like, what keeps making that noise? And I'm like, Paul, you have a chicken. You need to go sell it. It's worth like $50 or whatever. Like you spent $4 and now it's worth 50 or whatever. I don't remember what the actual price is, but the point is you're supposed to go sell the chicken. And Paul keeps being like, should I eat the chicken? Can you eat the chicken? I'm like, no, Paul, sell the chicken. You're supposed to buy an egg and then sell the chicken. But he picked up an egg out of a box or something somewhere, or an enemy dropped one, and he has it. And so now he has this chicken. And it's like, no, Paul, you're supposed to sell it. The point is, you make money by trading inventory space, right? Your discussion of the watering can and so on reminded me of the chicken in Earthbound.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up Earthbound because, like, playing Pokemon. So I've been playing Shining Pearl specifically, and like one of the realizations that I've had, like, in this one specifically, is like, I think there is an appeal in the RPG styles of Pokemon that kind of lines up with an appeal of Earthbound, in that, like, it's an RPG, but it just takes place in, aside from the Pokemon, what is supposed to ostensibly be, like, a normal place.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just normal towns, and, like, there's a little bit of, like, near futurism in it.
Yeah.
But, like, for the most part, like, it's not, like, fantasy times where it's, like, there's some beautiful nature, but, like, it's, like, not part, any of, all the, like, stuff is not something that you would think about specifically relating to. It would be more, like,
yeah, like,
literally fantasy.
in Pokemon, you can ride a bike.
Right. Well, that's not the main appeal, but I get what you mean, right?
It's something that you could conceivably do yourself. If there were Pokemon, you could
Right.
also ride a bike.
Ride a dragon,
But, like,
ride
so, like,
a
when-
bike. One of these is the main appeal of this game.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
But
one of them.
I think one of the things that helps make Pokemon as a franchise, like the main games, feel so relatable is that aside from the Pokemon themselves, like, everything you do in the game is something that you could conceivably do.
Yeah.
Like you said, you can ride a bike, you can go in a cave.
Beat kids up
Wow.
and steal their
Obviously,
money.
like,
Yeah.
Take down a terrorist organization as a 10-year-old.
like you can go to different towns, and some of them will be bigger cities and some of them will be smaller cities, and, like, obviously, like, not all of those are super relatable, but they, like, that closeness of, like, aside from the introduction of Pokemon, there's not a whole lot that you have to, like, separate yourself from in the world to sort of, like, insert yourself in there, I think is a key component. Because, look, at the end of the day, right, there are, I would say, major problems with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Some of which maybe have addressed by patches by the time this podcast... there was a patch that I just downloaded today that apparently fixes some core bugs that have been popping up. You can speed run the game in, like, 15 minutes because you can, like, press... There's 2 buttons that open the menu, and if you press them in a certain sequence really quickly with a specific timing, you can open 2 menus, and then that just breaks everything. And you can basically just walk to the end of the game. And you just have to open menus in certain orders to get past different roadblocks, but, like, you literally just walk to the end of the game. And, like, there's lots of glitches where, like, you just walk through stuff or you get stuck in weird places. And I haven't gotten soft locked yet, but I've gotten, there was one tweet that I posted, I think I put it on the Discord, where like I ran through a ditch that like if I had gotten stuck in that ditch somehow, I like popped down and popped back up. And it's like, if that had not happened, I could have been soft locked in that ditch.
Yeah.
Because it was like you were raising and lowering water level to make the bridges pop up. So like, and there's a lot of weird, just like in Sword and Shield, this is sort of going into the games I've been playing in recent times because it's just been Pokemon. But Sword and Shield has some graphics that are not super polished, but they're like, I'm trying to think of the distinction. They're like there, right? Like, they're designed, and they're maybe not high quality, but they're like put together into a cohesive structure that is complete. It's maybe not as polished as it could be, but it's complete. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl have all these weird graphical things that are just like really distracting. Like in Double Battle, sometimes like the way that the trainer models are like set up, like your character's hand will like, because like all the Pokemon trainers will like throw their hand out when it's your Pokemon's turn to move, right? And that's like supposed to relate like, oh, they're commanding their Pokemon to do this attack. But like the trainer's hand will like appear for like 2 frames. and obviously like I'm sure it looks nice and smooth like if you're looking at the trainer when it's happening, but like for those 2 frames it just looks like a weird graphical glitch, like something popped up for 2 frames and then disappeared. And then there's lots of things where like text boxes like pop up and then disappear really quickly because like I'm guessing they were supposed to like pop up this text box if there's a gap, but like sometimes that gap is like 5 frames, so it pops up and then goes away again for some other thing to take its place, and like it just looks gross. And they've got clouds going over people and it's like supposed to be aesthetic, but then a lot of the time like you'll cut to the end of the trainer battle where it's like zooms in on their face and has a reaction, but you can barely see it because they're in a shadow from a cloud. And there's lots of like graphical stuff like that and mechanical stuff like that. But like I can see that and I can internalize it and I can say like this is not as good a product as I would have wanted it to be. But like at the end of the day I still have a good time with it because I don't know, I'm invested in it, and there's still pieces that are like good. Right? Like, even down to little things like when your Pokemon walk behind you, even though it's like way too slow for some reason. I don't know why they keep doing this. This seems like a very easy fix. Even if the pathfinding isn't that great, you can still make them just follow you a little bit faster. Though I think some of it is like, I've seen some glitches where like something does follow you too fast and it like freaks out. So maybe they made it slow because following fast causes glitches in their current system. Anyway.
And you want to avoid glitches, obviously.
Like this little one, this like little thing where like there's Zigzagoon, right? Which is a raccoon themed around zigzags.
Does it move in zigzags?
And like, it doesn't just move in zigzags. It does these like little diagonal hops.
Oh my goodness, that's
behind
adorable.
You.
I love zigzags.
And it's like, it's perfect, right? Like, and like that core bit is still in there. And so when people talk about all of these, you know, really unpolished things that probably, you would think wouldn't be in a game of this caliber, of this pedigree, but like, at the end of the day, those core little things, I've been watching a lot of people play, stream this game too, because it's I think it's a very obvious source of streaming and SEO ranking and stuff. But like seeing, that like all of the mechanics to like get invested in the game, right? Get invested in the world are still there, right? Even down to like the little messages that pop up when, your Pokemon says, oh, it got rid of its status condition because it didn't want you to worry, right? And like, for some people that lets them get into the world deeper and like gets them more invested. And I think like at the end of the day, as long as those key features are there, then like the appeal is always going to be there. And again, until there is a competitor, which many have tried, and none, exactly 0 have succeeded long term. at least in the video game space. I would
Yeah.
say
I mean,
Digimon.
Well, I was
getting
gonna
fun,
say-
isn't it?
What about in the digital world?
Digimon,
Cyber Sleuth was a success, I think.
is that a game or a TV show?
It's a game. Well, there's a horror Digimon show that's happening right now.
Like the Digimon, I felt like definitely went toe to toe with Pokemon in the television world, and probably surpassed it a bit in the
Digital world.
Well, okay, you've made this joke like 3 times. Like, I don't think it's gonna land any differently. The audience has already laughed.
It did for me.
Okay.
That one was great timing.
In like
Surpassed
OVAs
it.
is what I was gonna say. Maybe not OVAs translated to English. That hasn't always been their best work.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe the games have done better than I'm aware of. But like there was Yokai Watch, which I think is still around, but like definitely didn't.
It was really big in Japan for years.
Yeah.
But
I think
not over here. It was like intrinsically like Japanese. I think.
Yeah.
So I understand why.
Yeah, because even like the intrinsically Japanese parts of Pokemon are still like you can get if you don't know what the animal is that the Pokemon is based off of, like you can
still
just
like,
think
oh,
that
it's
it's
so
a
cute
made up
little-
animal, right? Like, and there are some that are just made up animals, right? So
Yeah.
even if you don't get the reference to whatever Japanese culture it's like sort of inspired by, if that is indeed what it is, like you can still like you can just be like, yeah, that's a magical fantasy creature. So yeah, of course I don't recognize what it is, but yeah. So I mean, like that's definitely why Yokai Watch didn't make it as big here, because like I think like one of the key principles was like the not just yokai, but like yokai with like specific cultural references to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just that it's based off of Japanese folklore, but like the lessons that they're supposed to embody, like don't do this or don't do that, are also like fairly cultural and specific too.
Yeah.
I would, at some point, I should try a Yokai Watch game just to see. I think one of the things I also didn't like about the games was like, I think you didn't get to like pick what your yokai did in like battles.
You got it from like a little in battle? I don't remember how battle
I remember
worked
there was
exactly.
some
It was
key
weird.
point of the battling system where I was like, well, this just isn't. This doesn't sound fun. Like I want to be. I think it was like
Yeah, I don't.
they picked.
I
You could
remember
pick
it
their
being
move
weird. I
sets.
don't remember if it wasn't fun or not. But I had the. I think I might have the first one still somewhere, but I never finished it or got very far. I have to look
I was
for that.
gonna say that Monster Rancher does that, where like the battle is done by the creature and you just kind of have to hope and pray that it uses its big attack or whatever, or that it heals itself when it needs to be healed.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like that seems like a slam. Like every other RPG, you get to pick the moves of the people that aren't you in most RPGs. Like real human people or fantasy human people that should be like mentally independent of you, and like you still pick what they do. So like we can make it so that I can tell these creatures what to do. Cause
At least when it's not, it's like optional. Like you can have persona, you can like have your teammates fight as they want, or you can command them directly. So it's like an option.
Mm-hmm. And even then in Persona, like at least you get to pick what one of the characters do. And it sounds like in Yokai Watch, you pick what none of the characters do. And like same with Miitopia. And like Miitopia, it kind of makes sense because like the emergent the emergent narrative of random chants and random text boxes spurred on by a few arbitrary choices at the beginning of the character creation, right? Like that's the whole point of the game. And so like if you controlled it, then like it wouldn't feel as like, oh, these are characters that are like doing things. But like there's still the key part that like you get to have like control over your character at least.
Again, I don't remember how battle worked in Yokai Watch, and I haven't played Miitopia, so I'll just assume you're right about everything.
If more people would do that, the world would be a better place, wouldn't it? I stare longingly off into the distance. I'm staring longingly into my duvet that is right next to my face, because that's what it has to do to make my audio sound okay. Does anybody else have any more thoughts on RPGs in the monster catching genre, or should we move on to a new topic?
I think we might be ready to move on.
So, I think you brought this up, or maybe John brought this up last podcast. Someone, not me, brought this up. And then it came true.
Oh.
Blue, would you like to say the thing
that was me, and it was 2 podcasts ago.
Oh, was it 2?
Yeah, because we forgot to talk about it last time.
We didn't have to say that. We could have pretended like we were timely about it, but go on.
Superfans would know. I would know that I lied to superfans.
Well, but the non-superfans would go and listen to the last podcast to find out what it was, and then they wouldn't find it, and then they'd have to then listen to 2 of our podcasts.
I'm not entirely sure that is what would happen, but okay.
Please give us a review.
I correctly predicted that the final DLC character for Smash would be Sora. And so now before, if you listened, you would know that I don't really have mains in fighting games. I always press the random button and I get a little bit good at everyone.
Your main is random?
Or I stay bad at some of them, but I still play them. But now I have, the closest thing I have to a main, because Sora's out.
Are you a big Kingdom Hearts fan?
Well,
Are you a fan of the concept of Kingdom Hearts?
I like the Kingdom Hearts franchise most of the time.
Right. As someone who has also played many video games that part of franchises, I feel the vibe that you're going for, where you're like, I don't want to say that I like all of the things that this franchise has done, but you're invested in it.
I was gonna say I've played all the games, but I haven't played one of the games, the newest game. So I've fallen out a little bit since the ending of 3. But, sorry, what was I saying?
You picked Sora.
We were talking about Sora, and I
mentioned Sora's
that,
in Smash, and he's a character that I've wanted in the game for years. I put him as the poll or whatever, the survey.
Mm-hmm.
He was my choice, and he ended up being, everyone's number 1. Well, not everyone's number 1, but, the top spot, which is why he's in this one. So I don't want to be ungrateful, but why I wanted Sora in it was because he has such a vast array of abilities, and his moveset could be amazing. And then they put him in, and they were like, okay, so your moveset is 95% you hit people with your sword. And then it's 4% regular Final Fantasy magic. And then 1% there's a Kingdom Hearts reference in your Final Smash. So I'm a little bit, I don't want to say disappointed, but
underwhelmed,
because he's a lot of fun still, and I am still gonna main him. But there's just a bit of a missed opportunity with really playing with what makes him special and what the Kingdom Hearts franchise has that is different than everything else. So there's a little bit complicated feelings there. But I am so glad he made it in.
Yep.
We can also quickly segue into the other fighting game related piece of news.
Oh yeah, last time we talked about the rumor that what sounded like it was going to be NetherRealms, but it was just WB, and they're making Multiversus, so...
which is
That-
the
The platform fighter that, like, has Rick and Morty and Batman and Steven Universe and Adventure Time and Game of Thrones and potentially a bunch of other things.
yeah, so like lots of different Warner Brothers properties, and I think what like one of the key things is like do you remember like when Xbox said it was going to always be online? And
Yeah.
then PlayStation came out like the next day. It was like, hey, you're not always going to have to be online. And everyone was like,
Yeah, exactly.
yes!
Yes.
It's like, that's not really like, okay, this happened with voice acting and the Nick game and this one.
They have
where it
like
was
Kevin Conroy and stuff, so they're going pretty hard.
But it was just sort of like if that hadn't happened with the Nickelodeon game, I don't think anyone would have batted in. Like literally, the only thing they'd be talking about would be the ones that like weren't were different than like their established. Like I think Steven Universe it has a different voice actor.
Oh, does it? I didn't know that. But this game isn't like just Smash clone. First of all, it's like free to play, so Brawlhalla is too. But also, it's more focused around, like, tag team, like, I don't know.
Yeah, they have, like, the different...
Capcom 2, I think.
They like, different characters have, like, different classes, I think, that they've sort of, like, some are, like, more, like, I think I saw one of them being called, like, support. So, like, the idea is that, like, you do a tag team and like you might have characters that like don't do as much damage but like help another character do more damage.
Oh, interesting. I missed that
and, like,
part. But yeah, it's like it's a tag battle platform fighter, which I think is an entirely new thing, but it makes logical sense as someone who's a fan of fighting games. Like, they did this. This is a subgenre of fighting game. Why don't we do like that variation in this? And I'm like, that's a neat idea.
I don't know if it's like tag in the same way as those kind of games,
yeah,
right? Because like that's where it's like
those are like
one at a time.
Yeah.
Right, this is like two characters on a team at the same time, which is kind of in Smash Brothers, but it's not. It's really kind of a bonus mode. It's not really used heavily in most situations.
But I'm really interested. My Sora for this game is Ben 10. I hope he gets in. So that they can mess up his moveset.
I imagine that they would just put in certain aliens from Ben 10 and not like Ben 10 himself, Benjamin Tenjamin himself.
That'd be fine. But, like, did you know Ben 10 is like a higher grossing franchise than like a lot of things?
It doesn't
like
surprise
in the top
me.
100, it's like bigger than X-Men, I think.
It's very toy. It's a very toy-friendly series, and it's been going on for a really long time. I mean, like, I remember watching the first episode of Ben 10 when I was, like, in elementary school.
Yeah, me too.
And
it's just weird, because, like, right now they don't have anything going on with it, so... They
don't? They have the... Or did they stop the newest show?
That ended, like, last year or the year before.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it, like, ended... I knew that there was, like, a movie that they did, but I didn't realize that like ended
a couple movies.
So is it like the highest grossing like in a year, like not just like over its course, but like currently,
it's like in the top 100 like profitable franchises of all time. Like Pokémon is at the top, or Hello Kitty is at the one of those is.
Yeah.
Pokemon
so it's talking about the
like
whole lifetime.
Media. Yeah. I don't know, but
I mean it's. I guess it's impressive. I don't like. It's not necessarily surprising, but it's not something that I would have been like confident enough to say, if that makes sense.
But
right?
It was rumored and it was real, and it's not made by NetherRealm, so they're still working on their new game that we don't know what it is, which is good news for me because I'm excited. And that's all I have to say.
I think I've sort of talked about I've talked about Pokemon a lot, and I'll talk about it more if you want on the GameCola Discord
Oh.
or on this podcast.
Yeah,
but,
after
I
liking and
think
subscribing, you can go join us on our Discord channel.
Yes, we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast, how you can do that.
Well,
But what
see,
games have you guys...
But if I say it in the middle, they can't just skip out on the end of the podcast.
Right. So now they know about
Why
the
would you
Discord.
skip the end of the podcast? That's where the little blooper is, the coda.
Yeah.
Right, well, yeah.
Everyone knows that's the best part.
Yeah, the coda is a fantastic part of the GameCola podcast, one of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
I like
Anyway.
how they all fit together, and you get your own cinematic universe if you pay attention.
Yeah, they're linked.
Don't spoil it. It's supposed to be a slow burn. That if you listen to all the codas in a row, it tells a story. It doesn't. It doesn't even. I'm sure it doesn't even a little bit.
Not even a little bit. No.
I have like maybe to like in place of the off-topic podcast because most of the stuff that we do just stays in these days.
Yeah.
To have like a video posted where it's just all of the codas from like episodes of certain period, like whatever makes like a 10-minute video.
I think it would miss out on like one of my favorite lore pieces, which is I think it's Jeddy and Anna are secretly cousins because she stole his copy of Pokemon Emerald. Or no, that was Joe.
Oh, right.
Wasn't it Joe? I don't remember. One of you had lost your Pokemon Emerald copies.
I lost my Pokemon Emerald copy.
And Anna stole her cousin's Pokemon Emerald copy. So therefore...
karmatically, Anna stole my copy of Pokemon Emerald.
Or they're secretly cousins and aren't aware of it somehow.
But, Jeddy and Blue, what games have you been playing in recent times?
I just finished Mega Man 6 about an hour or 2 hours ago.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What did you think?
You
played 1 through 5 as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just context.
I didn't like 4 very much, but 2 and 5 and 6 are pretty good. 6 had like the jetpack and the punchy body modes, and those were great additions. I really liked those.
Yeah.
6 was weird because I had all my power-ups already for the final boss, and then there wasn't one. I just beat up Dr. Wily and put him in prison, and that had never happened before. So that was messed up. I beat the final boss with just the Mega Buster, and because I was...
Yeah, the final boss is fairly straightforward.
I didn't expect it because it had never done any of these things before, and I was like, oh, I beat the game. He didn't break out of prison, and I didn't mess up somehow. I just tied him up, put him in jail.
Yeah, that is like...
He didn't use his alien powers.
No, that's like one of the so that actually like gets picked up in Mega Man 7, which is like the only time that happens in the entire franchise where there's like clear continuity between the ending of the first, like Dr. Wily starts in prison at the beginning of Mega Man 7.
Interesting. Well, it's not the next game. I'm using Joseph's big graph data chart thing. So next is Mega Man X.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, Mega Man. So they were working on Mega Man X, I believe, while they were working on Mega Man 6. I think development was kind of split. And then they made Mega Man 7 in like 4 months. The story of Mega Man 7's so like this is, I'm gonna go, I know too much about Mega Man, so if I talk about Mega Man, it becomes too much, but the beginning of Mega Man 7's development was, there was another company involved. Capcom was kind of expanding development, and the beginning of development got stuck in, like, the ideation phase, like coming up with ideas for the game for a really long time, and so then, like, the actual production part of Mega Man 7 was like really short, really rushed. Apparently, like the the multiplayer mode that you can kind of secretly unlock at the end of Mega Man 7 was made in like the last few weeks of development. And the person found out that they were supposed to like make it because they were given sprite sheets and said that was how they found out, is that they were given sprite sheets for it. And he's like, what are these for? And it's like, oh, the fighting mode that we're going to have you put in. The competitive fighting 2-player mode that you're putting in the game now. And
Is that in the Legacy Collection? Can I do that?
Yes. I'm pretty sure.
Sounds exciting. I have no idea what that is, but I want to find out.
You can definitely look up if you can do it. I know there's some weird things with codes in some of the games. But like when you beat Mega Man 7, it shows you like a password. And like the password like gives you all of, like the items and like access to all the levels in the final boss, but then like if you hold L and R or something like that and use the code, then it takes you to this like secret fighting mode. It's like fairly bare bones because again it was made in like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Secret fighting.
But yeah,
robot.
I guess the correct so are you playing like all of Mega Man Classic and then Mega Man X in order, basically?
I'm playing, like, I'm gonna try and play the whole, like, main franchise in order. Like,
okay.
X and Z and ZX and probably Battle Network, because I actually like that game.
Yeah, Battle Network is completely different. But also, like, kind of... well, you gotta take long enough...
It was the only Mega Man game I had partially played through, and it was fun, so...
Are they gonna make Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection? It seems like the next obvious choice, right? Like, yeah, I want a new Mega Man game, of course. But like I would take a Mega Man Battle Network Collection, especially if it's at the caliber of the Zero ZX Collection, which is like about as good as a collection like that can get.
Yeah, like if they make it, I'll buy it. So
yeah, so like I would not be super disappointed. It would be like Mega Man 12 is like 10 out of 10. Mega Man like Battle Network Collection like 8 out of 10.
I just know you haven't played Battle Network according to your data sheet.
Well, if you look, I believe Mega Man Battle Network 2
is played, but not the first one.
And Mega Man Battle Network 3 should be listed as owned, if I make that distinction.
It is.
Yeah, see? I keep so I got both. I think I've said this on the podcast before, but like, this may happen to you guys. Do you guys ever reach a certain social status within your, not even necessarily your friend group, but like within your social community? In my case, this was at school, of being the video game guy to the point where like when people are like getting rid of video games, they're just like, oh, I'll just give a couple to this guy because he likes video games.
I was gonna say like entirely no, I have no idea what that's like, but actually I was that with card games. Apparently one time this guy at school just came up to me and gave me like a baggie full of 1,000 Yu-Gi-Oh cards and was like, here. And I was like, okay, cool. Thanks, bye.
Did you play Yu-Gi-Oh?
A little bit, yeah. I didn't know I was the Yu-Gi-Oh guy, but...
That's how you found out?
That is...
I mean, I definitely was the Mega Man guy at that point in my life.
I was the Ben 10 guy, definitely. So.
Jeddy, were you... What kind of guy were you?
What man were you? Mega Man villain. What?
Yeah,
what
I
robot
guess.
Master were
you? What thing were you invested in overtly enough that people would give it to you because they thought you would like it?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question because like, what are people? I have gotten.
What are people?
Well, was I talking to you about the books, the Japanese books? Was that on the podcast or was that?
I think that was just us
on the stream,
talking about.
Maybe.
Oh yeah, it was on the stream. That's probably what it was.
You can also go to our YouTube channel, GCDotNet, if you're not listening to this there, and we also do gaming streams on occasion.
Lots of fun.
And that's where I discussed with Joseph while we were playing 2-player Mario Super Picross, that I have received a few books in Japanese that I think I have a Garfield book, like it's just the comics, but they're all in Japanese. I don't think I mentioned that one recently.
No, you didn't.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
amazing.
That's
Yeah.
so
I
good.
want that.
Yeah, just like I guess that's the thing is, again, I was gonna say, there was a period where I was known as like the scooter guy, but like no one's going to give me
Give you a free scooter.
yeah.
You're also, I think, the old movies on VHS guy.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
also true. Did I discuss that my
Yeah, you
You talked
brother?
about your brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I talked about.
That's why I'm basing that on.
Yeah.
But basically, Jeddy started receiving random VHSs in
Mystery.
the mail, and then later discovered it was his brother
Yeah.
sending.
Yeah. Oh man, I was watching this weekend. So I hadn't looked at my collection in a while, and then I ended up picking up a bunch. Oh man, I was so disappointed. I had bought 10 VHS tapes at a church sale because all of them were like Beach Party 1992 or 4th of July, New Year's Eve, and Halloween Party.
Oh my
And-
goodness.
And I'm like, man, I want to see what people were dressed up for Halloween in 1993. Like, I want to know.
Was it a
how-
formal Halloween party where no one dressed up?
No, somebody taped over every single one of these tapes, which is like absolute
Oh,
garbage. It was like,
no.
oh boy, I get to watch Martha Stewart and General Hospital from like
That's
2007.
upsetting.
Yeah, I
I'm
was
disappointed for you.
Oh man, I was
That's
so...
like false advertising.
Like
maybe there was like, what if they were just like always like Martha Stewart tapes?
Yeah,
and
they just
someone
decided-
was like, that's got to be a game that someone does. Is like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna write like, cool
yeah,
Personal
Something-
beach
event.
party, Gone Wild.
Paul and Joyce's
1991.
wedding. Man, I want to know about Paul and Joyce's wedding. So then I ended up going back to a series of tapes that, speaking of a different Paul Franzen, the last time that I saw him, he gave me a big box of VHS tapes that he had bought at various garage sales. And this one, I kept looking at the label. I was like, I have no clue what this says. As I was putting it, I finally realized that it's written sideways. So like you have to turn the tape sideways, and then it says Cowboy Way
okay.
vertically. So I just kept...
What?
It says Cowboy Way, like, but it's written vertically. So I kept reading it, and I'm like, U-O, is that a 3? Like I'm looking at trying to read what it says, and then as I'm putting it in, I realize it says Cowboy Way. And it's like really garbage quality, so I'm like just fast forwarding through whatever this movie Cowboy Way is. And then the last like 3 hours of the tape is the Weather Channel.
Oh my goodness.
It was beautiful. I actually sat and watched 3 hours of the Weather Channel from 1997, and it keeps being interrupted by like, the new Buick, all new for 1997, pay zero money down until 1999. And it's like, oh man. And then it's such a garbage quality tape that like, when they play the local segments, because like the national segments, they have people actually say like, oh yeah, well today in the Pacific Northwest, there's going to be, high wind advisories on the coast. But then when they do the local segments, it's that beautiful, MIDI, easy listening, smooth jazz. But the thing is
Like
that
that?
it, I would say more like, but like the thing is that it's that beautiful VHS quality where it keeps getting garbled, so it's just constantly interrupted, and like there's a wowing, I believe is the term, and like I feel like I am vaporwave now that I've watched this VHS tape. Like I've consumed so much essence of vaporwave that it is part of me
Your
now.
robot master name is Vaporwave Man.
Yes.
That's
great.
fantastic. Now, Jeddy, I've really enjoyed this story. You do have to tell us what video game you've been playing in recent times.
Also, it feels like a year since last time, but I did play I played a chunk of Guardians of the Galaxy. It's really great. Oh, and have you ever had like a game really want you to play it even though you're not interested?
What?
Like Fortnite.
Yeah, you're talking about...
Fortnite really wants me to play because they just keep adding like really great comic book character skins.
I
thought DC Universe Online. I don't usually play MMOs, but like one of the recent story chapter DLC things is the Legion of Superheroes and Static, and that's my favorite DC team and my favorite DC superhero in one little like story chapter thing. So it's like someone made it specifically for me, so I might have to try DCU. Anyways, that's all I have. Now I can give you permission to speak, Jeddy.
Yes, thank you. I mean, to be honest, I haven't really been playing many games in recent times, so I was going to say, if there's anything that I've been playing recently, if you can call it that, it is the 6502 assembler.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's quite a trip.
So, the 6502, for those who are not knowledgeable in this very, very specific part of gaming and technology hardware, was like the main CPU, 8-bit CPU, during the times of like the NES.
Yeah,
and
it's
I know it's in the NES. I think the Atari, even like Atari before the NES used.
Yeah, and like the Commodore 64 and like a whole bunch of stuff. Like they basically were like, what's a cheap and reliable thing that we know is going to work? Like rather than being, like a lot of game systems which are like, this is cutting edge, it's got the latest stuff, and then it's just like a buggy nightmare. They were like, look, we want the reliable thing that we can get easy production on. We're going with this thing that's been around for like 10 years now. And
so it's in a lot of like 90s technology.
Yeah. And so, I've been making the dive. Like I kept looking, and I've talked about this before that like, the game that I've been playing is Game Maker Studio or whatever. I kept going in circles. I was like, do I care about this new subscription format for Game Maker? Do I want to switch to Unity? And like the moment that I go to switch to Unity, everyone's like, oh yeah, we hate Unity. They support the military. Like they do subcontracting for like military simulation and data processing or something like that. And so like everyone, the day that I like decided to finally download Unity was the day that everyone was complaining about it and being like, boycott Unity or whatever. So I've just kind of been sitting on it. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to program for the Nintendo. The Nintendo.
How's that gone? Have you programmed anything for the Nintendo?
Not yet. I actually only did that this weekend. So like I have all these days off at work that like my paid time off that I don't want to just abandon. So I've been
right, because it's the end of the year, and so you want to like that's what I'm doing. Like I just got all of my like I think like 2 weeks of roughly of vacate because like it doesn't count the weekends. And I've just like put it all for like Christmas holiday. And I'm gonna fly back to the United States and then just be there for almost 3 weeks and then come back.
And so I took Friday off and I was like, okay, this is gonna be the weekend I'm gonna actually sit down and do this. I've been telling myself for a very long time now that I was interested in it. So I've been going over all the different op codes and so on and learning about the specific memory locations. And like it's funny is that I follow a lot of developers, but now I know what they're talking about. Where like somebody posted on Twitter, and he was like, "Oh yeah, look at this glitch. It's because I'm setting the 2001 to this bit," and it's like, "Oh, okay, now I know what that means." Suddenly, it barely makes sense. I have yet to actually program anything, but I have open example.s, and I can tell you all about LDA 0, STA 2000, and so on.
Well, I would think that like I think that's what people who like make like really in depth like ROM hacks do for like NES games, right?
Yeah.
It's like you have to write assembly code.
Yeah.
Like I watched some people who like play like Super Mario 64 ROM hacks, and they talk about like sort of distinction between like ROM hacks that are like use like Blender to like where the primary thing is just making like scenery and Blender,
Yeah.
and then the people who like go into the assembly code and like program in new mechanics to Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
So like I don't think the Nintendo 64 used this particular CPU, so I don't know how
Yeah.
transferable that knowledge would be. Yeah, it's 60. Yeah, so if it's a 64-bit, that just means that they had 8-bit processors in it, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
That's how that works,
Yeah.
right?
It is interesting because I was very confused. They kept calling the like STA is like store the accumulator at the provided memory location. I was very confused because they kept like loading two different values and then storing it in the same place. I was like, what are they doing? Like, what isn't that just overwriting it? And then I find, it's an 8-bit processor, but it has 16-bit memory locations, so you can store. You have to call them separately. The two 8 bits, put it into the 16-bit slot, so you call it twice to fill the full 16. Yeah, it's been a bit of a trip. I've been learning a lot. It's curious.
I'll
tell you. I'll tell you when I beat the boss. What were you gonna say, Blue?
So the people who made DC Universe Online and City of Heroes, they just like kind of quietly announced that they're making a Marvel game too.
You mean a Marvel game as well, but I was like, oh yes, Marvel game 2, the sequel to the Marvel game.
No, they're making a Marvel MMO, so that is how I found out about the recent expansion of DC Universe Online, because I was like, what are they up to? Oh, they're doing all of my favorite things. Now I want to play it. But I'm not very familiar with MMOs, so I would want to have people to play with, but it is like a 10-year-old game or so there's like no one who knows the game will be doing the old content from the beginning, and I'm gonna be a noob by myself. So it's gonna be a bit rough. But yeah, they're working on a Marvel game that's some sort of like investor conference slideshow or whatever. They were like, one slide briefly mentioned a Marvel game that they were working on, and then they're like, okay, next slide. So yeah.
Do you remember earlier in this podcast where we talked about various places that you could consume GameCola content and then said, like, wait till the end of the podcast to find out about that? Well, you've reached that part of the podcast.
Congratulations.
Thank you for listening this far. And now here's your reward. If you would like to see more GameCola content, perhaps in written form, or some of our other podcast type stuff that is also hosted there, you can go to our actual internet website, GameCola.net. And if you want to see more video type content, like which also includes video forms of this podcast, along with game playthroughs like Danganronpa or The Great Ace Attorney, you can check out
morning streams and night streams.
Yep,
yes.
GameCola Family Game Night and Family Game Morning. You can check us out on our YouTube channel, GC.net, the letter G, the letter C, the word dot, the word net. If you want to keep up to date on stuff that GameCola is doing, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for GameCola. That's who we are, and that's how you find us. And on many of those places, like on the website, you can, and in the Twitter bio, you can find links to the GameCola Discord. You just need to click the invite link, and then you will be there, and you can come hear and listen to us talk about, well, not listen always, but text. You can look at text where we talk about things, and it's a fun place to be, and it's where certain conversation topics for the podcast spawn, like this discussion about Pokemon that was like the title and the primary focus of the early part of this episode. And so you can sort of drive podcast content. If there's certain things that you're interested in, talk about it on the Discord, and we will probably be thinking about it enough to talk about it on the podcast then.
Yes.
You can also request podcast topics.
Yes, come
as well.
Good.
Come say hello to all of us on the Discord.
Especially me.
Specifically and individually, say hello to each one of us.
Yeah.
And that will unlock the secret premium GameCola prize.
Fighting mode we made in the last few weeks.
Well, I was gonna say, hello Mario, hello Toad, hello Princess. Hello.
How do you like your eggs? Oh, I like mine sunny side up. How do you like your eggs?
You can understand references like this.
Yes.
Just listen to GameCola content. Specifically, Hacks and Slash episode 1.
Yeah.
Is what that reference is if you were left out in the cold on that one.
Which is a classic GameCola.
Yes.
It's number one for a
We need
reason.
to move on, though, before we delve into so many references that this podcast becomes completely unapproachable. Thank you for listening. That's what... Oh, yes, the incredible niche restaurant.
I do not think, therefore I do not am.
Please visit us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the GameCola podcast. Have a wonderful time of day, wherever it is, whenever it is you are listening to this podcast. And we will see you next month. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye. I'll miss you.
And I am your host of Podcast Commander, Joseph Martin, joined by...
I'm
Alex
Blu
the Jeddy.
Ryder.
Nope,
Oh
sorry.
no,
Are we going in Discord order?
Yeah, we always go in Discorder,
Okay. Go ahead.
as
bro.
I've just decided to call it right now in this moment. Discorder.
which is the opposite of what Discord is.
Oh.
Well, so far that is not borne true.